As I'm sure you're all aware, thanks, Julie. As I'm sure you're all aware, compliance renewal is quickly approaching for June 1, as it always does. And the focus of tonight's conversation is all things compliance. So there's nothing off the table here. Again, we want to make this conversation as helpful and as productive as we can for you all. Send us your questions. We're always here to help mid-season as well. So it's not just we have this conversation and then we're done from there. Utilize all of us here as a resource, and we will be sure to get you everything that you need from a compliance perspective. So with that, I will go ahead and kick things over to Julie to get us started.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon. Like Shelby said, my name is Julie Parks, and I'm just going to be walking us through this compliance presentation. It has just started to thunderstorm, so if you hear some rumbling in the background, it's just a little bit of thunder. No worries there. So as Shelby mentioned, specific to the June timeframe. So for those of you who may not be familiar, July 1, 2023 is the official start of the 23-24 season. What happens is starting June 1, any compliance that is tackled during June 1 before July 1 and into the season, that is then all attributed to the 23-24 season. So the most important thing is that y'all don't want to get started on any compliance items before June 1, because what will happen is it will be attributed to 22-23, and we definitely don't want that to happen. So we're taking time with all of you this evening to just go over some stuff, and then once that June 1 day hits, that's when we start sending out all the communication. We want you to start working with your members and really just making sure that everyone's ready to rock and roll come July 1. So, throughout the month of June, if you don't already have things in the works, maybe, just have that plan in place to be pushing maybe the communication that we're sharing with you all out to your member groups. Post something like a compliance camp. I mean, I made up that phrase. It doesn't have to be called that. But we know a lot of times folks have difficulty maybe recruiting volunteers, or, you have a handful of folks who just never get their compliance done. So maybe if you did something where you invite folks to the rink, pizza party, I don't know, some sort of incentive to get folks to come together. They bring their own devices, they sit down, they do their safe sport training, they fill out their paperwork for a background check, whatever the case may be, but really providing that community atmosphere to get everybody together. Let's do it all at once. Let's not have to chase one another throughout the season. And then again, throughout the month of June, checking on compliance statuses, making sure you feel comfortable where folks are at and how that's kind of going along. Also, throughout the month of June, Tim is going to be hosting Zoom office hours. So from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Mountain Time every Thursday, and June's one of those months where there's 5 Thursdays. So y'all will have 5 opportunities throughout the month of June to just pop in if you have a question, that it's okay if maybe other folks here and it's not really very specific situation. Pop in, ask the question. Tim will be readily available to talk through things compliance. We'll share some of our contact information later on in the slideshow. You certainly can reach out individually if needed, but the hope being that we can kind of drive folks to those designated times if it works with your schedule to answer any questions that you may have. So again, June 1, I know you're all hearing that, right? That's going to be the kickoff then when you all get started on compliance with your groups. All right, so compliance, when we're talking about compliance in general, what does that mean? And, at its bare minimum, it is a requirement for adults to be eligible to participate in their specified role, whether for US figure skating or Learn to Skate USA. And again, the key word here is adults, so 18 and older. We will talk briefly about anyone who's under the age of 18 and what that looks like for them. But across the board, we're talking about folks who are 18 and older. Not all adults require compliance. So as it stands, it really depends on the role that you're serving within your organization, at your club, at your program. We will go through that further, but it's important to know not everyone is required to complete some sort of compliance, and we'll dive into that a little bit deeper. And then the third thing is compliance encompasses different requirements for different roles. So again, we'll touch on that in a little bit, but just to give you some awareness, coaches have very different compliance requirements than, let's say, a general volunteer. So we'll touch on that briefly, but again, just having that understanding, compliance for one person is not exactly the same for another person. So why is compliance important, right? We all know that sometimes things are just check the box and we have to make sure that we're doing them, but it's important to also understand, well, why am I doing this? What's the point? What's the end result here? So one of the things why we think it's so important for compliance to be completed is it really creates a baseline for participation to create and maintain safe, healthy, and professional environments. You know, we're definitely working with a lot of minors. There's a lot of fun involved, but we also have to remember at the end of the day, this is a professional setting for a lot of us that are participating in figure skating. So just making sure that those standards are similar across the board. And it's creating an equal foundation for all of those serving in any given role. So if you are a coach for US Figure Skating or you are an instructor for Learn to Skate USA, there is a baseline that every single Learn to Skate instructor and every US Figure Skating coach is meeting those minimum requirements. As an example, right, with continuing education requirements for coaches, that helps them stay abreast of current trends and standards of practice. The Learn to Skate USA certification course, same thing. It's just testing knowledge on an annual basis to make sure that you're informed and giving the best information to your students. When we talk about officials, you know, they have to sign a code of ethics that enforces the same expectation across all officials that they are working in ethical and honorable ways while they are officiating on behalf of the sport. And lastly, and I personally think one of the most important reasons, it creates that minimum expectation for families participating in the sport. I think it's a pretty standard expectation, you know, it's 2023, for a family to bring their children to a community environment, that the folks who are working there or the folks who have been tasked with working with their children have completed some sort of safety check. And again, it's really just creating that baseline of creating safe, healthy, and professional environments for all stakeholders. So who requires compliance? This is a big question we get a lot. I'm not going to read this chart to you. It is found on the last page of our SkateSafe handbook. It has been updated with a lot of the roles that we know definitely work in some specific capacities and what their interactions look like with minor athletes. The general rule of thumb, if you don't fit specifically in one of these buckets, is any adult member of US Figure Skating or Learn to Skate USA who has authority over or regular contact with a minor athlete. So we certainly have, you know, folks listed like coaches, instructors, directors, team leaders, team managers, synchro participants, right? Things along those lines. We certainly have a bunch of those listed out, but we also know that every club operates a little bit differently, and you might have somebody in a role that might not fit cleanly into one of these buckets, and that's okay. We defer to that kind of baseline. Are they having authority over or regular contact with minors? And the most important thing to take away, if somebody is participating in a role requiring compliance and they are in fact not compliant, they are not permitted to participate. That is a strict line in the sand. If you know somebody is not compliant and they are participating at your club or in your program, we'll talk about what you can do a little bit later in this presentation. But standard guidelines are, if you know you're going into next season as a coach or an instructor or a director or a club leader, you have to have your compliance completed by July 1st. Now, we also know throughout the year, right, as you might be trying to recruit volunteers, or maybe you're hosting an event and somebody's kind of being pulled in for the first time, that's okay that they didn't have it done by July 1st. But the guideline there is they have to be compliant prior to their assigned interactions with minors. So July July 1's really the main one that we're sticking with. And then as folks maybe are being pulled into different roles throughout the season, it's just making sure that they are compliant before they're assigned interactions. Did someone say my name? Oh, okay, good. All right, rolling through. So again, that can be found on the last page of the SkateSafe handbook. I highlighted that third column. That's specific to clubs and club leadership and all the folks within a club organization that require compliance. So I just highlighted that one to really draw attention to it. But again, all of this information that you see here is on the last page of the SkateSafe handbook. So what is required with compliance? Like I said earlier, it depends on your role, right? It might be a little different depending on what your responsibilities are. And the most important bare minimum for all folks, except for mandatory athletes, but that's also listed appropriately on the matrix on the last page, is safe sport training. And that is valid for 365 days, and an NCSI background check. And that is valid for the current season plus the following season. So when we say wait till June 1, and then you have folks that are completing their background check, if you complete it, let's say June 15th, it will be valid for the 23-24 season and the 24-25 season. So we certainly like to get folks in on that cycle because that's essentially 2 years. If you take a background check, let's just say May of 2023, that means it would be valid for this season, 22-23 plus 23-24. So just giving some parameters there about how the background checks work. But again, that's why we really encourage people to take it in that June timeline, because then it's valid for essentially 2 whole years. Now, depending on your role, you might have just slightly different additional requirements. So if you are on the club board of directors, you're a club officer, a chair, you require those minimums plus membership with US Figure Skating. If you are a Learn to Skate USA director, assistant director, or instructor, you would require those 2 minimums plus membership of Learn to Skate and that certification course that you would see in your Learn to Skate portal. Now look at officials, right? So officials, they require those 2 minimums plus all of these additional items, right? So this is a great example. If you're saying I'm a club president versus I'm an official, compliance means 2 very different things. You both have the same minimums, you both require membership, but then you can see the officials really have a lot more items that they need to make sure they're taking care of every year. And the same goes for coaches. Lots of things in addition to those 2 minimums that need to be met. So again, if you're talking to folks about compliance, having that awareness that it can be different things for different folks. Each person is responsible for their own compliance requirements. And when they log into either their members only profile or their Learn to Skate USA profile, those items should be listed out for them, that they essentially just get to click the buttons and go through the steps there. This last item underneath coaches, that PSA membership, that is only if that coach is coaching at qualifying competitions and or for Team USA. So that's not a requirement for all coaches. There's kind of that little caveat there. It depends on what level that they are coaching. But again, we incorporate that into our compliance protocol check. So we know that particularly with Learn to Skate, certainly with US Figure Skating, it can occur, but we know probably more so with Learn to Skate, there might be folks that are operating in a position of authority, maybe if they're a junior instructor, for example, that they're under the age of 18. So what does that mean? Because like I said earlier, compliance is really required for folks who are 18 and older. So if you are a US Figure Skating member and you're operating in some capacity, but you are under the age of 18, you don't have any compliance requirements other than membership. If that's, you're a skater, if you're a junior coach, using some of those types of terms, if they're volunteering, if you're under the age of 18, it really just is a membership situation. But for those Learn to Skate USA instructors, you would require that Learn to Skate USA membership and the certification course. So the background check and the safe sport training are not required if you're under the age of 18, But it's important to know, regardless of your age, if you are a junior instructor, you do have to complete that certification course.
Julie or
Yeah.
Esperanza, if one of you could address any minor who is being an assistant coach for Learn to Skate, is that course still required for them?
Yes. So usually an assistant is like an instructor assistant. They're still actively working, with the children or participants in the Learn to Skate session. So it is the same. They need to have the Learn to Skate membership identified as an instructor, as we know that's the only way that the certification course will populate for them. So yeah, same requirements, even if they're just assistants. Mhm.
Right, thank you.
Great, thank you. So then plenty of folks turn 18 in between July 1 and June 30th of the following year. So what do the regulations look like for those? Let's say you are a junior instructor. You start off the season, you're 17 years old, you have your membership, you completed your certification course, and then you turn 18 in the middle of the year. So safe sport training then gets triggered. That must be completed before or on the 18th birthday. Because what happens is the day after they turn 18, if that course is not completed, they are not compliant and would not be eligible to participate in that role. So that's why, we know it might not be very easy to complete it on the 18th birthday. So that should be available to them. I think we activate it 30 days prior. But if they wanted to take it 60 days prior, they could certainly go into the Safe Sport dashboard and take that training themselves. But again, that's valid for 365 days.
One thing there, and then I want to jump to a question while we're on the topic.
Mhm.
If they are taking it prior to their 18th birthday, parental consent is required, and that is it's tracked within our members only database as well as the Learn to Skate portal. So that parent of the minor would just have to sign off for the 17-year-old to be able to prepare for their upcoming 18th birthday to get ahead of the ball there. And then expanding on your answer, Esperanza, can you talk about volunteer youth helpers in a program? I'm not sure what that looks like, but hopefully you can provide some clarity there.
Yes, from what we understand and what we see across the country, program directors just tend to use different verbiage. Some call them junior instructors, some call them assistants, some call them volunteers. They're all pretty much the same thing. And ideally, even what's really beneficial about even having your youngest volunteers that are helping out with instructing classes, having them identify as an instructor and take that course is extremely educational for them, and just really helps benefit the program and the class overall. That way they are just as informed as the coach, and they understand what's going on and can better assist your program.
Awesome.
That's great.
Thank you.
And to that point too, let's say you have someone who's under the age of 18 who might be volunteering as a runner at an event, or maybe they're working at a registration table. They wouldn't necessarily have authority over minors, so they wouldn't be required to take those type of requirements. But it really, to Esperanza's point, if they're on the ice, if they're assisting, if they're helping out with the lessons, and again, they kind of have that authority over those younger skaters, definitely having that membership and certification course navigated.
Yeah, and the certification course, and Esperanza, correct me if I'm wrong, but I personally feel that it's really helpful from just a general safety perspective of making sure that the people who are on the ice have the tools and the skills and the knowledge that they need to help conduct a course in a safe manner, because we know that there's a lot of kids that are just starting this fresh. So we want to make sure that everybody who essentially has their hands in the pot with, teaching these kids also have this general safety skills to make sure that we don't run into any issues or safety concerns while on the ice.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really kind of goes over class management and what it means to be an instructor in any kind of leadership position within Learn to Skate USA. So there's no detriment to having any of your volunteers, no matter the age, participating in it. And it is open book. Anyone who has the instructor membership has access to our instructor manual, and they're welcome to use that through the duration of the course.
Wonderful, thank you. So then that secondary piece of the minimum requirements for compliance, once you turn 18, You cannot take a background check prior to turning 18. So for that reason, we offer a 45-day grace period for our skater or our instructors, or whatever the capacity is that they're enrolled and have a role that requires compliance. Once they turn 18, that is the first day that they would be activated to go in and fill out the application for that background check. Typically, they take about 7 to 10 business days to complete. We all know sometimes things get a little wonky, or maybe additional information is required. So again, we want to offer that 45-day grace period. That skater or whatever role that they're participating in, they will show compliant until either that background check comes back, right? Then that becomes kind of their permanent check mark for the season. Or if that day 46 hits and they did not complete their background check, that would then trigger them into non-compliance. So just having that wherewithal, that safe sport training, to Shelby's point, with parental permission, if it's being completed before the 18th birthday, that can be done in advance. That needs to be completed by the end of the day on that 18th birthday. When we're talking about background checks, they can't be activated until this person turns 18, and then they have a 45-day grace period. We encourage them to do it sooner than later, just in case things go a little wonky or maybe additional information is required and there's some back and forth with our background check provider. But that typically is enough time for folks to get that situated and be up to date with their compliance. So how to check compliance status. Compliance card is our number one way that we would encourage folks to verify their compliance. So again, the responsibility is on the person that they have managed their compliance appropriately. For you all as club and program leaders, if you are someone who is checking compliance, it's really, really easy for you to say, hey, can I see your compliance card? They show it to you, you know it's verified. So on the left-hand side, that's our members only portal. On the right-hand side is our Learn to Skate portal. It's the same icon in both portals. Someone would log in, they would click on that. That's directly on their homepage. They don't have to go digging for it. Click on that little icon, and then a pop-up will come up. It'll just ask you what size do you want your compliance card to be in. They can download it, have it digitally. We know there's plenty of folks out there who like paper. They're more than welcome to print it if that's their preference. But we're really going to be pushing the communication for this upcoming compliance renewal season. Make sure you have your compliance completed. And then once you do, you have easy access to your compliance card. So if at any point somebody wants you to verify, you can certainly do that on the spot. So here are 2 examples of compliant folks. So you'll see the one on the left. This is the US Figure Skating compliance card. And this person serves lots of roles. Okay, so they're a volunteer. They are a SkateSafe chair or president. They're an official. They're in another club leadership role, and they're also on US Figure Skating's board of directors. Their compliance requirements are all valid until May 30th, 2023. So what this means to you all is, let's say you're at an event on June 3rd and they show up and they say, look, here's my compliance card. Well, it's no longer valid, right? So just having that awareness that those dates are really helpful to know when they are compliant until. Same thing with Learn to Skate. I blocked out these names and identifying numbers, but it'll have their name, it'll have their member number, and then it'll show their compliance status up until a certain date. For the 2023 season, the latest you can be compliant through is June 30th, 2023. And then once we get into July 1 and the 23-24 season, the latest someone can be valid through is June 30th, 2024. So just have that awareness that these compliance cards are valid for the season. So if you're at an event, someone says they're compliant until June 30th and the event is coming up, let's just say July 17th, you would want to be checking it again at that point. So on the right-hand side now, we have a couple examples of folks who are not compliant and what that might look like on your end looking at their card. So very clearly it states volunteers or coach not complete. That means they are not eligible to participate as a coach Volunteers, it really depends on your role, but again, that person couldn't be assigned as a locker room monitor. Maybe you just need somebody to work the front desk at a registration table or something along those lines. They wouldn't necessarily require compliance, but they absolutely would not be permitted to participate as a coach until that is satisfied. And then similarly with the Learn to Skate, this person's identified as a program assistant. They have not completed their compliance. Therefore, they are not permitted to participate in that role. So just to give you some visualization, you're just looking basically for the roles that are identified on that card and the valid through date. Those are the most important things for you to be paying attention to. Again, we're putting the onus on the members that they have this. Club leaders, program leaders do not have access to go in and download this themselves for other people. So we're really going to be pushing that communication that folks take care of this themselves and have it readily available for them. So the secondary way that we would encourage all of you to check someone's compliance status is our reporting forms. So we have a few different versions that are available to you all. You may or may not be aware they are not 100% perfect as of today. Our product support team is diligently working on making sure all the data and all the technology is syncing up properly. That is over my head, out of my wheelhouse. But just, making sure that the data is proper. So then when you go in and you're accessing these reports, you're seeing information that's reflective of the person's actual compliance status. So one report that we have available is called the full compliance report. And that's available to anyone who is a US Figure Skating or Learn to Skate member. And you can check anyone's compliance status for US Figure Skating or Learn to Skate USA. It is an extensive report. I think it's currently at over 800 pages. It downloads as a PDF, but you can certainly hit Control F and search someone's member number, their last name. It might be a little intimidating at first, but you can certainly search through it and find the information that you need. A club compliance report is available to anyone who is listed as a club contact. So that is more limited to the scope of who has access to that report. And the folks who would come on that report are only those who are identified as folks requiring compliance at your club. So just having that understanding, if you are looking at your club specifically, you would want to use the club compliance report. Let's say you're hosting an event and you have folks coming in from all different clubs and organizations, you would want to be checking that full compliance report. And then similarly, we have a Learn to Skate USA compliance report that is available to directors and assistant directors. So if you are identified as that role within your Learn to Skate USA profile, you would have access to that report. And same thing, it would just be the folks identified within your program. You could specifically check their compliance status. And the third way you can check someone's compliance status is if you're, encouraging compliance cards, you're checking reports, and maybe something seems a little wonky, or someone says, yes, I completed that safe sport training, but it's not reflecting on my account. Reach out to us. As Shelby said, Tim is our compliance specialist. He definitely takes the lead on making sure that everyone's profiles accurately reflect what they've completed. Shelby and I also offer support and jumping in during times of a lot more influx of requests. Usually that June timeframe is one of those times. So again, you can always use the tools that we have available to you. You can always also reach out to us if you say, hey, I went through this report and there's still 5 people that I'm not quite sure about. Can you check for them? Because we have access to our database and we can accurately say what's been completed and what hasn't. So we can certainly support you in that way as well.
Julie, quick question, jumping back to the reports and members only. Can you just touch on how to find that or where to find the resource guide with instructions to that?
Absolutely. So all 3 of these reports, we have instructions on the SkateSafe website. It's usfigureskating.org/SkateSafe. And there's a whole compliance section, and we have links to instructions on how to access those reports. We also will be communicating that out to all of you. Come June 1, we'll be sending out an all membership email about compliance, but we'll also be sending out specific to club and program leaders with some of those links so you know how to access that information as needed. Okay. So then what do you do if someone is not compliant, but you know they're still participating, right? So on our end of things, we typically know that there's going to be those checks if someone's participating at a competition or an event that requires check-in, right? Because we know folks will be checking against their compliance status, usually in those scenarios. Well, what if you have an instructor who never participates in a competition or an event, and they're showing up every day at your rink and they're working with minors? So again, this was on the first slide. Members who have not met their compliance requirements are not permitted to serve in that role until full compliance is met. This is, of course, for the safety of the skaters that they're working with. It's for their own safety, and it's also for the safety of you all as leaders within your organization, making sure that everybody that you are confirming can volunteer or maybe have even hired to work for part of your program has sufficiently met all compliance requirements. Again, it's going back to that family security, right? Parents are probably expecting these folks to have completed those requirements. So it really is their responsibility, and then you're the back check for that to make sure that they are doing that. If you notice that somebody is not compliant, they're showing up at your rink and they're going out and doing their thing, notify them that they must address their non-compliance immediately. There's no time for, I'll get to it next week, or okay, maybe later. They should know that they need to be compliant. And if they are intentionally not doing it or not taking it seriously, that's where we really call on all of you to step in, notify them, make them aware, and let them know that they need to address it immediately. If you do that, and they continue to participate without completing their compliance, please submit a report to SkateSafe. That QR code takes you to our reporting form. That's actually for all areas of misconduct or policy violations of the SkateSafe handbook. You can certainly go into that form and type other non-compliance. And then what we would do is, make sure that everything is squared away. Are they actually not compliant? Or maybe there's just a piece of something missing based off technology. But we would double check that. And then if we see that they are truly not compliant, we would then notify them, have it on record that we notified them. And then essentially the hope is that they are going to become compliant so they can continue participating. Again, if you know somebody is continually participating, file the report, send it to us, help us have that awareness. You're all the ones that are at the rinks and are really the eyes and ears. So we are relying on you, not that you have to handle it, right? If you address it once and they're still choosing not to take it seriously, send it our way. Let us take care of it. There's only so much that we want you to be stressing over with this, to making sure that it's taken care of. And we certainly can help and support with that as well.
Just to take that one step further from the response and resolution side of that, it's not intended to be disciplinary when we reach out to people about their compliance unless they're knowingly participating without compliance after it being addressed. When that happens, where we get a report from you all that says, I've addressed this with them and they're still not doing their compliance, please help. I'm not going to go to the coach or whoever that person is and say, well, Julie told me that you've been warned by so-and-so that you're not compliant. Like, no, that's not the approach that we take. We want it to be anonymous. Typically, we'll just tell them that, we did a spot check and we saw that you're not compliant, like, help us help you kind of a thing, rather than, name dropping exactly who the concerns are coming from. So please don't be concerned in that. And same goes for any other SkateSafe report that you file. If we don't have your permission to share your name, it will not be shared with that responding party.
So that is the end of the official presentation. Looks like we still have a decent amount of time to take any questions. I'm actually going to stop recording.